the commodities go up, which is inflation, and then poverty, because much as if you 10,000 today can buy 4 kilos of sugar, the next morning you'll be able to buy 2 kilograms. That means you are becoming poorer, and that's why people are crying of poverty, much as money may be a lot in circulation, but which has no value. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Paul, trying to brush broad topics there. We'll try to get them in perspective as we conclude this debate. Spectrum, hello? All right. Okay, our next caller is... There seems to be a minute hardship there with the lines. You can still call in, it's being rectified. And you'll be able to call in a very short while. Mr. Sekitto, should we take our money, reduce the dollar holdings and invest in...
Hello?
Yes, okay, we have you now. Your name, sir?
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Owere.
Yes, Mr. Owere.
I greet Mr. Mayega and my brother there from KACITA.
Yes, sir.
Actually, the issue of inflation is really biting, and it's hard, especially on workers now, because almost everything has gone up, and government, I don't even think they are thinking of increasing salary and even trying to actually make things work out for us, the workers. So I would like you, Radio 1, to bring as Minister of Finance urgently to come and tell us what is happening. Because for us as workers, tomorrow or on Monday we are coming out with a strong statement. But we would like first to hear from the government what they are trying to do. Because we are not going just to sit back and see ourselves. Because the government is now like, he has folded its hand and looking on. There must be plan B, where the inflation has really risen up. And I would actually urge all the union leaders, let us now question the government on what next they are planning for the workers. Because we are not going just to sit back and wait. Thank you.
Mr. Aware, the trade unions, chairman of NATO, thank you for joining us tonight. Spectrum, hello.
Good evening, Edmond.
Good evening, your name?
Yeah, thanks for the guest to the studio.
Your name?
Now, a quick one. I remember that Moi, during his last time, printed a called Jirongo. Jirongo was one of his ministers. The inflation that was caused in Kenya around that time.
Cyrus Jirongo was not a minister, I was a youth.
I want to do some research,
leader.
And I want Mayega to react to that. Thank you.
Well, we didn't get you clearly. Spectrum, hello.
Hello.
Yes.
Good evening, Edmond.
Good evening, your name?
This is Wamboga.
Peter Wamboga, you're welcome.
You know, Edmond, I think you can see how the agriculture sector is very important to this economy. And yet it is not well prioritized among priorities. What goes in as percentage of GDP is very little. And looks like funding to the agriculture sector is declining. We leave the agriculture sector to nature and to the peasants. There is no deliberate, well-planned agriculture development for the country so that you can buffer the country in terms of shortages of food or terms of drought. Now, much of the inflation we are facing is related to food prices. What has come later is the problems of oil as related to the crisis in the Middle East. But you see, if oil ran out totally and cannot come at all and the whole Middle East is engulfed in war, we must survive as a country. We must have food to eat. So I'm saying the government should stop the rhetoric. We should have practical moves to see that irrigation is developed for the country so that we don't even lament if there is drought. We have sunshine, we have water to water our crops, and we have food on each person's table. This must be done without delay. Secondly, and lastly, the environment. These are things that to many people are very distant. But the environment is so much damaged and there is no serious effort to curb the damage. And that is related to the agricultural sector. The production and productivity of our land is declining due to a serious environmental destruction. Now, Edmond, you could have read a column in the Observer that one minister withdrew over 600 million shillings to go to the campaign. Unfortunately, I'm told that very minister lost. But that gives you a picture of how much our politicians withdrew money from their accounts and how much they have been putting on their accounts, personal accounts. That means they have been draining a lot of money from the economy, and people don't have the money in their pockets, the ordinary citizens. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Peter. Let's get straight back to the studio. Mr. Mayega.
Yep.
Yeah, you had the questions.
Well, I've had the questions, the prices going up, the prioritization of agriculture, the simmering oil problem. I entirely agree with all these observations, because it's extremely important for us to, I think, explain to the people of this country what steps, practical ones, can be taken in as far as ensuring that we prioritize agriculture, because, as you can see, agriculture in this country, I think, employs the majority of the people.
That's very true.
That one is for a fact. I agree entirely that this sector is extremely important for us, and it should be prioritized it should be prioritized by government. It's extremely important. I have no doubt about that. I was reading the NRM manifesto. Of course, I'm not bringing in
politics. It's all right, no problem.
And I see that there are plans actually to begin irrigation schemes in this country.
To do what?
To start irrigation schemes in this country.
Right.
That I read in the manifesto of the NRM, and I want to believe and I want to trust that this government is definitely going to work out something in that direction as far as irrigation schemes are concerned in this country. Environment is extremely important for us, all of us, because, I mean, when you go on cutting trees down, and this affects the climate of the country, and eventually it affects the agricultural production in the country, and it's extremely important for us to ensure that the environment in this country is preserved, the forests are kept intact, and so on and so forth. But we must also appreciate the fact that as time goes on, the population increases. Right now we are talking about, I think, a population in this country of about 30 million people.
That's one.
And these pressures of people have been actually exerting a lot of pressure on the environment, especially forests, which have been cut in a number of areas in this country. It's extremely important for us as a country to ensure that the environment is preserved, so that the climate is also, as a result, preserved. Because the moment the climate is not preserved, the moment the environment is not preserved, then we get a problem, because this affects, it has a direct bearing as far as the agricultural sector is concerned. Printing new notes, old notes removed, and all these kinds of things. I think that those are technical things. How I wish that there was somebody from the Ministry of Finance to come and explain these things, because as far as I'm concerned, I'm seeing fewer notes of the old, fewer notes in the old currency, and more notes, more new notes than the old ones. So I am not very sure about that one. So I think somebody from the Ministry of Finance needs to come here and explain to the people, because it's the right of Ugandans, I think, to be explained too, and as far as what's happening in government and what practical steps are being taken as far as making sure that the economy is assured as much as possible. There was somebody who talked about inflation biting, and I thought this is extremely important also, because once, as we have said before, once the money is too much money chasing goods,
too few goods.
That creates an inflationary pressure in the country, and therefore that one is definitely a very serious matter, which I think the country or the government needs to address as quickly as possible.
Well, about me, before you come in, maybe I'm not the spokesperson for the government, but the central bank people were here when they were issuing this new banknote, the redesigned banknote. They said they're not introducing any new amount of money. It wasn't a new currency issue. It was an exchange, a redesign basically. So the amount of money in circulation was going to stay the same.
Edmond, there's somebody called Jimmy who asked a question and they said, let me go do research. I didn't understand the question properly.
It was sliding into politics.
Yeah, you know, I want to be as out of politics as possible on this, because it's a very serious matter and politics almost going off the table. We shall not achieve much, even if we intended at this point in time. So therefore, Paulo made certain observations. But in my own opinion, and the little economics that I know, when we are computing the inflation, we get a variety of sectors put together and get to have the indices compiled, and then we know what it really is at. What helps the government to plan is the standard deviation. When you look at all the figures from all the sectors, you put them together, you will know the figures as the overall inflation rates. But the standard deviation, how much is fuel? How much is the consumable items?
The central contribution.
Then that gets the government to intervene and have control measures and where to have an entry point into regulation, guidance to that extent. But when you look at the overall picture, the kind of inflation we have, Edmond, is still mild, which cannot cause the alarm that it takes.
The figures, but certain sectors of the economy could have been left out. So we'll be talking about a few controlled elements.
So with government, his intervention is needed depending on the standard deviation. How is this one? How is the other? Then if this happens, of course the economy will be moving. The other issue is about the priority of agriculture. In fact, I'm one person who thinks that Uganda has not yet taken care of the comparative and competitive advantage.
Yes.
When you look at the budget proposals and the cuts that are given to the agriculture sector,
very small.
They are very far from what Uganda needs. Employer of 80% above,
right, and
the peanuts are given to that. We need to rethink that and encourage government from all walks of life to think about the Uganda's comparative advantage, God-given soils, God-given water, God-given everything, and we are not utilizing it. Finally, Mr. Owere talked about the workers. We are equally concerned, but the workers' unions are more concerned. You cannot believe that in this 21st century,
yes,
Uganda has no minimum wage.
Well, it's an open market.
And it is a huge challenge.
No, it's not a thing of modernity, it's an open market.
That's good.
You bargain with the employer.
That's true. But the other thing is, in modern management, world over, people make provisions for inflation.
Yeah.
I'm arguing the public and the employment sector,
yes,
to always think about this, because inflation is a very big threat, and if you don't make provisions for it, the economy can be going astray, and the dualism, many having a lot, right, others having no survival.
2 countries in one. We have to end here. Thank you very much, Mr. Issa Sekitto, spokesman for KACITA, and Mr. Henry Mayega from University. Thank you for tuning in. I've been your host, Edmond. We'll be back tomorrow at the same time, only on Radio 1. Up next is the news in English. Stay tuned.
Spectrum on Radio 1 FM 90 was brought to you by Stanbic Bank.
The views expressed on this show are not necessarily